Okay, we are now live. So if you are joining, please do drop in the chat where you are joining from and what you're hoping to get from this session. I think this is quite a broad topic and there's several directions Neil and I could take this. So it would be great to know what you're thinking, what's on your mind, what's got you, maybe if you're slightly worried about anything and you're comfortable sharing that, please do let us know. If there's anything that you are super excited about and want to see if there's anybody else that shares that enthusiasm, please do drop it in the chat. If you've joined one of these sessions before, you'll know they're really conversational. People have great conversations in the comments, people make connections in the comments. So seize this opportunity for kind of our virtual CAF, where we're talking about the role of change managers in AI. But the official start time is in 3 minutes. We're not going to hold you too tough to that, just in case you're just coming out of a meeting at 1 o'clock and you're dashed in here. So we'll probably start about 2 to 3 minutes past one. Okay, so I can already see we have Canada in the virtual building. We have Woking. We have London. Great. Just to let you know, I am expecting an Amazon delivery, but it's only batches. So I'm expecting them to post it through the letterbox. So if I go mute and my camera goes off, that's why. It's not because you've said something that I'm so disgusted by that I've decided to remove myself.
I can't see the chat.
So this is one of the interesting things about streaming software. You have to go onto LinkedIn. So I use it on my phone, which is why you can see me. And then the chat is the comments underneath the
Okay.
actual event. Okay, we have Loughborough. We have the United States of America. Not all the states. NJ, is that New Jersey? You can tell I excelled in geography at school. Okay, so we'll just give it 3 more minutes just in case people are joining from other meetings. So just giving them that time. Thank you. Love your webinars. Thank you so much. I was saying this is the last webinar this year that I'm hosting, and I'm so thankful that Neil agreed to join us on here. I will be joining other people's webinars, but you won't see me hosting one again until next year. But I do have some super exciting news. Well, exciting to me when I announce it. I'm not going to announce it today, but just so there is some news coming about future webinars. We have Wales in the building as well. Oh, have you found it now, Neil? Have you got it on your phone? Can you see the chat?
I
Can you
did,
see
I
the
did,
okay.
but I felt bad looking down when
Oh, probably not the best for the whole webinar. Oh gosh, the north of England is not exotic, but you know what it is? It's romantic. You know, there's so many kind of great novels and literature and paintings from the north of England. So don't knock it. Southampton. Your first time in one of these webinars. Well, you're in for a treat. It's
definitely.
it's an interesting place. Okay, so we'll just give it 2 more minutes. Malvern Hills. Malvern is
Yeah.
beautiful. I've never been, but I've seen so many pictures and I've got so many friends there. London. All right, so we're just giving people time to join just because 1 o'clock is on the hour, and if people have come out of other meetings, just kind of giving them time to take comfort breaks and join. So we will start in 1 minute now. We've got Winnipeg, Canada as well. So hello. Please do let us know if there's any questions that are burning in your spirit at the moment and you're really hoping they'll get answered here. Drop them in the chat, or if we know we're never going to be able to answer them, we'll also let you know so we can manage your expectations. There's a lot that could be fit into this session, but this is kind of an introduction, and there's some other work that Neil does that if you're keen to kind of take a deep dive, he'll speak a bit more about that as well. So wait until the end to hear about that. We have Barcelona and we have Brussels. Bonjour from Brussels. Love that. Moorfield. Hi, Lola. Okay, so let's get started. It's 3 minutes past exactly. For those of you who are joining via the recording, please also feel free to drop your messages in the chat afterwards, and then I'll pick them up. If it's something I can't answer, I'll pass it on to Neil as well. So welcome. We're so happy to have you join us on this webinar looking at the role of change managers in AI. My name is Nisi Azigbu, and I've worked in change management for the past 15 years in a variety of roles. But now I work with change managers specifically to build their confidence and capability in a changing world, because we know that what's required for leadership now is very different from what was required in leadership even a year or two ago, to be honest with you. So to make sure that we're constantly on our game and we're getting that kind of potential released into the commercial fields. Now I'm going to hand over to Neil, my personal AI expert. I keep on top of everything that he says, not to add too much pressure, but this is somebody I really do respect his word and his thought, and he does have a background in change management. So Neil, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, thanks very much for the invite. I'm love to be here, and I'm really interested in your views on this as well. So we'll get into that. But so I'm Neil Harrison. I'm founder at the Adaptologists, and I provide advisory and learning services for human-led AI adoption. So I've been in change over 25 years now in various roles. So I've worked in global IT consulting firms in talent and change. I've worked in boutique companies. I've worked as an internal employee, and I've across sectors. But I've been lucky enough to have lived and worked in Australia and the US. So, and I'm now in the UK. So yeah, quite a wide-ranging career in change management and exciting times with AI.
Amazing. Thanks for that. So I know you've got a presentation prepared for us. So if you bring that up, but in terms of this, it's going to be a conversation. Neil will give us this presentation, but it will very much be conversational. So if you do see me looking down at my phone, it's so that I'm making sure that you all are brought into this conversation and I'm asking your questions at the appropriate time. So before we jumped on live, Neil and I were discussing that there's actually a couple of ways that you can look at this. This is not a session around teaching you how to use AI as change managers. This is not that. So if that's what you've joined for, there are other spaces that I can direct you for this. This is a bit different, and I think it's important for us to recognize, so whether you're a change manager on this call or whether you're a leader who's driving change, you're impacted by actually, how does AI impact me and my job? But also, how do I shape environments? And how do I make sure that the environments that I'm leading in are adopting AI appropriately, that we're preparing them, that I'm having the right conversations, that I'm introducing the right mindsets, that as an individual and as a leader, I am modeling the right behaviors. So we'll be exploring a bit of that. So Neil, let me pass over to you and we'll carry on the conversation.
Thanks very much. So I think we're going to, what I'd like to do is effectively answer those three questions that we sort of laid out in the invite. So the first being, why is AI different to other digital technologies? And I think it's important to understand that in the context of what is the role of a change manager for AI adoption. So I've got 8 things here that I think make AI different to what we might consider traditional digital transformation approaches, and why I think that also leads to how we might want to change how we think about change in this context. So I won't go into all of them in detail, but these first 4 in particular, I think are worth bearing in mind. So obviously, I don't need to tell this audience, but if I caricature traditional change for those that aren't in the change community particularly, we can sort of caricature the approach as setting out a future state, so as a sort of future state, and as is that we are aspiring to, moving towards to be. There's an as is that we're mapping to understand our current state, and we transition people typically through our current state to the future state. And if we think about change in those broad terms and look at these challenges or the differences with AI, we can start to question whether those approaches are appropriate. So let's look at the speed of AI innovation as one example of what we need to cope with in change. So WhatsApp today is the world's biggest messaging application. So that was launched in 2009, and it took 3.5 years for 100 million users to subscribe to WhatsApp. So 3.5 years. In November 2022, we saw ChatGPT hit the scene. Now, bearing in mind contextually, no one really understood what AI was. It was a technology that many people have been researching in deep technical realms, but not really something that the rest of us understood particularly. But it only took 2 months to reach 100 million users, which is extraordinary pace. And of course, when we look at that speed, and that was November 2022, it's gone through, 6 or 7 pretty major updates since then. So we've seen it go from natural language processing, so text input, to multimodal, so it can process images and voice and text, and the power of the models is much higher. We see it integrated into, for example, Microsoft products and so on. So huge amounts of change in the AI innovation space for AI in a very short space of time. So how do we cope with that? Of course, that leads us to an uncertain future. So if we're mapping out a future state in 6 months or 18 months from now, how on earth can we do that and understand what the technology is going to look like in that time? I just don't think we can predict that far ahead in terms of what solutions might look like. And of course, that uncertainty leads to fear, which also leads to that third point. And I think if anyone's had a conversation about AI, they've almost certainly also had a conversation about job losses in that same breath. And so what we see is this huge, really quite deep emotional response to AI that I don't think we see with traditional technologies. And not only do people worry about, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage, but they're worrying about the sort of societal impact that might lead to, thousands of jobs being lost because AI is seen to be, quicker, better, and cheaper. So these are really fundamental, and I want to dive into that point a little bit deeper because I think that's really critical. And then fourthly, when we think about AI, we can also think about that in terms of how we might understand traditional approaches, top down. It might be an enterprise solution, it might be a functional solution. So we improve what finance is doing, or we improve recruitment for HR, things like that. They tend to be top down, and traditional approaches are useful in those regards. But if anyone on the call or listening to the recording thinks about their own personal use of, say, ChatGPT or AI, you're probably almost always all using it slightly differently. So we have different skill sets, different backgrounds, different needs, different contexts, different risk appetites, and so on. So that presents both opportunity and risk, because we've got a situation where every individual in the organization has a unique requirement for how they use it. So how do you describe, the why and what's in it for me and why now, when every individual has a different unique requirement in effect. And that point about fear, so there was a study earlier in the year about over half of the people in the workplace at the moment are fearing AI. I think this is one of the biggest risks that we face as change managers. We are, we're in the people game, aren't we? And, this is really critical for us to be able to address. And as I say, I'll have a look at that in a minute. These other four, let me just touch on them, but if there are questions, we can go into it. But obviously, last time you delivered an ERP solution, you weren't thinking about the ethics of that rollout, probably. So we've got ethics, we've got data biases, and what that leads to in terms of fairness and everything else. We've got a technology that is by definition and design generative, so it's predicting its outputs statistically. So just because the input's the same doesn't mean the output will be the same. In fact, typically it's not. So how do we deal with that? Legislation and policy around this is evolving a lot slower than the tech. And we have an environment where when we get it right, so huge opportunity in this, when we get it right, human AI collaboration, where we're bringing the best of both of those things together, it's going to fundamentally change how we think about work. It will change how we think about our job design, our job roles, how we're designing jobs, how we're designing organizations. So that organizational design, job design will shift in ways I don't think we can predict yet. Both, I find that very exciting, but it's also a challenge and a risk. So let me pause there before I jump into the fear thing. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we do have a question. So Alexandra has asked, my question is, usually as a change manager, my clients already have their to be well defined, or they have a vision or strategic objective that are easily translated into targets for the organization. And then my role is to help bring people to that target. But here with AI, my feeling is that to be is not yet defined. So how does the change manager cope with this? Should the change manager bring the solution with him or her?
I think so. We can't predict the future, but we can aim to imagine the future. And I think we do need an articulation of what that future state is in the context of what the business is trying to achieve. So we stay out of solution space. You don't try and predict what tools or what enablers are going to lead to that future state, but you can describe a future state that is inspiring and compelling in a way that describes where you want the business to go and where you want the organization to go. So we want to improve our customer experiences is not defining your future state in terms of what the solution is, which we can't predict. So I think it's important to define a North Star, but not define the solution to the North Star. And I think what our role then is finding out, working with people to identify, well, what are the solutions today that allow individuals or teams or parts of the organization to move towards that future state. So staying strategically aligned is quite important.
Yeah, and that's such a big point. I think so ordinarily, you've raised so many points here, Alexandra, and I'm not sure if that was your intention, but in a good way. And actually, it speaks to a lot of what you've raised here in the slide, Neil. So if I play back what I'm thinking, so on the one hand, we've got this massive opportunity presented to the world to reimagine the way that we work. A step down from there, that is then impacting us as change managers because we're part of the world. So we also have to reimagine kind of the way that we live, the way that we work, and the personal impact that AI is going to have as us on individuals. As a result, we then need to think about, well, what's my relationship to the work that we do? So Alexandra, you've asked, does that mean we should be solutionizing? The answer is no, but we do need to think about the way we position ourselves in the organizations differently, because we're not just going from A to B now with a clean A and a clean B. And I'm being dramatic semantic here because we know it's never really that clean. The A and the B is never really that clean. It's like A.5 or something going to B.6. But usually it's clear enough for you to map out in reasonable certainty the steps that you want to take and what it's going to look like going forward. We're now in a situation where actually things are evolving so quickly across all fronts. So whether it's legislation, whether it's ethics, whether it's our personal relationship to AI, that we don't have that fixed state. So we now need to be thinking, okay, well, how do I bring value to this quite a grey situation? And for me, that is about being strategically aligned. So Neil, it's the strategy here, it's mindset, it's principles, as opposed to tactics, tools, and frameworks that tell you that you're going to take specific steps.
Exactly. I've been saying quite a lot recently that mindset over method is
Yeah.
important. There's another aspect of that in that when we say we're rolling out an ERP solution or something like that, what we're doing is we're saying this is the solution we want you to adopt. We're going to show you, we're going to train you, we're going to show you the SOPs, we're going to give you an FAQ. All this is born out of 20 years of doing this kind of work. So we know we're pretty confident about that. I think it's important to recognize that at leadership levels, they don't have the answer beyond what they want the organization to look like. So we stop at that. We stop at where is that? Show us the direction. The role then for us becomes how do we extract the great ideas across the whole organization in a way that starts to move the organization towards that goal, at an individual level, at a team level, and make the most use of that personalized requirements, that engagement, them creating the change for themselves, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, there's just a couple of comments here. I don't fear AI. Best discussions I've had in the last 12 months are with AI rather than a person. So there are people who are really forming those kind of connections. Fear is often based on the unknown, and there is so much unknown about the impact of AI at the moment. And yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Excuse me. So yeah, let's move into that. So good to hear. There are people that are excited about AI as I am, as well as those that do fear it. And the image on the right, by the way, it's a little personal joke because one of the first workshops I ever did on AI adoption in an organization, one of my first questions I had was, "Haven't you seen Terminator?" And I didn't actually know whether they were joking. Something told me they weren't. But anyway, so that's just a little personal nod to that session. But when we think about threat, it's important for us to do so in the context, of course, of people, the physiology of what it means to be human. And there's a guy called David Rock, been around a long time, Neuro Leadership Institute. And he devised a model based on neuroscience called the SCARF model. Now, this has been around for ages. It's a really useful, I think, way of framing the threat of AI, though, so I use it in my practice. So what David Rock says is that there are, broadly 5 domains that trigger our brain to either feel threat or feel reward. Right, so these 5 domains are more prominent than others in terms of whether we move to fight, flight, or freeze, if you like, or whether we think something is rewarding. And when we move to threat, what happens is the brain starts to prioritize our physical attributes. So our eyesight sharpens, oxygen starts to pump through the blood, the adrenaline flows, and all that kind of stuff. And that deprioritizes, if you like, our cognitive abilities, our abilities to be innovative, to be critical in our thinking, to be creative, and to be social, right? So those things dissipate when we feel threat. Naturally, we want people in the reward state. We want people innovating. We want people creative. We want them collaborating. So in a way, I view this as our role for those 50% that fear AI to get them out of that state. And if we look at why AI might trigger fear so much, in those domains that David Rock talks about, he talks about status. So I don't know if you caught the "Will AI Take Our Jobs" on Channel 4 this week, Missy, but it's quite interesting. There's sort of 4 different kinds of roles, and it kind of pitched human against AI in these different roles. And what was interesting for me was not so much about the results of that, but how people felt when they were in these challenges. And you could see the sort of visceral fear and reaction. My status is going to go because this thing can do my job better than me. I'm no longer going to be recognized as an expert because this thing seems to be able to do that job quicker, faster, cheaper. Well, I mean, that's not true, but that's the fear. So status is triggered because people fear that there's a technology that can do quicker and better, which I don't think we ought to be worrying about quite in that way. Anyway, certainty we've talked about. So how do we predict the future? That uncertainty creates fear in us because we want to be able to predict the future. If we can't predict the future, that creates a sense of threat because we don't know what's happening. Autonomy actually gets to that point we were just talking about how we can help people find the use, the value, the benefit of AI on their own, in their own terms, around their own workflows, around their own context. If we're purchasing Copilot, we're making training mandatory, and we're enforcing usage, which happens, we're removing autonomy. If we remove our autonomy, we're increasing threat. If we increase threat, we increase that inability to be innovative and creative and so on. And then relatedness, I've talked about job design change, role changes, job losses, all that kind of stuff that actually as social animals, we need those connections with other people. There was also a piece on the news last night about how people are using AI for companionship. So, so we're asking AI things that we wouldn't ask other people. So this idea of being social animals, there's an impact there. I mean, I'm not going to judge on that, by the way, because I think in certain situations that can be helpful for people. If you're an old elderly person sat at home on your own, actually some sense of I think some sense of engagement with somebody else is probably useful within reason. And then fairness, so data biases and ethical considerations are quite important. So if in our HR processes our data is biased, I mean, that is a significant issue for an organization because it's limiting the kind of people you're recruiting. You're actually stripping out your diversity in your organization. And as we all know, diversity leads to better ideas and better solutions. So it's potentially very damaging if the data is overemphasizing bias in certain areas at the expense of fairness for example, recruitment. So I'm going to pause on threat. If you've got any comments on that.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments come through. I can't see any questions, but just to let you know, kind of the conversation, what's going on. One aspect I think has the danger of being overlooked with AI adoption is its impact on the future of organizational design. And I think this is where us as change managers can be really helpful in making sure that organizations are thinking in the right way, asking the right questions, probing, making sure that we aren't too nearsighted. And it almost reframes the way you look at a change impact assessment. Not almost, it does, because you're no longer doing the as is to be. You ought to be thinking about actually future capabilities. If this is the way that we're evolving, how do we make sure that we're making changes that are more agile? And leaders often, just like with any change, sometimes they can get too much caught in the weeds. And I think our beauty and our value as change managers is reminding them of the bigger picture and connecting those dots. But absolutely, it can be overlooked. Another comment, 30 years ago, we had similar situation when the internet arrived. Some people feared it, some dismissed it, some embraced it. as change agents, we need to advise and support reactions. So yes, absolutely. We also have roles as role models here.
Mm.
And that's not to say that we should dismiss our own feelings, but it is being mindful about kind of the impact of the way we're expressing those, and us going on our own journey as well within organizations. There's another one. I think one of the concerns is where leaders see AI as a destination, not as a
Mm.
possible way of getting to a better defined destination. Another one, change managers are the architects of the discovery process, not the solutions or solution finders themselves. Our role is to help organizations build the confidence and capability to discover solutions themselves, as they are the domain experts in their own world. AI is an enablement tool for them to use for certain tasks. So just a bit of the flavor of the comments.
Yeah.
There's a lot more, but
Uh, yeah, but,
I'll leave it
that,
there for now.
I mean, brilliant comments, right? And that last one, I think, especially important. And this idea, we saw a whole swathe of memos, didn't we, going out from CEOs wanting to declare AI first, ways of working. And I think that fundamentally misses the point, doesn't it? If we are promoting AI first, the implication of that is human second.
Yeah.
And that, that certainly isn't how we ought to be designing our organizations for the future. So, we've got quite a huge challenge to overcome, of course, because many organizations today are still driven by this kind of industrial age, with drive for efficiency and productivity. That is a very hard thing to break out of after so many years of that being the expectation. And the expectation that leaders have all the answers and everyone else just kind of follows along. Again, these things, we need to break this path, if you like,
Absolutely.
and think about work in completely new ways and how we can elevate the human role in all this. I think.
Absolutely.
I don't know shall I move on or?
Yeah, yes, please.
So I think it's worth recognizing that whatever the statistic is, there's lots of them around, but it's pretty clear. It's certainly clear to me in the work that I do, but it's clear in terms of all the surveys that you look at as well, that we are struggling to get real value from AI. I think there's lots of reasons for that. I did quite a bit of research around what data we can see in 2025. And so this list on the right-hand side is what I deem from lots of different sources to be eight common reasons for why AI adoption is, well, I say failing, it's hard to measure, isn't it? But not achieving what they set out to achieve, I suppose, or in some cases actually explicitly stuck in pilot and never going beyond the pilot phase. So some studies actually articulated it in terms of that. But anyway, these 8 things are very common across why we're not achieving the returns that we anticipate. I was going to say the color codes, if anyone's colorblind. So the predominant color, the everything except for 2 and 7 on that chart relates to people and process issues, right? So if we think about people, process, data, technology as being 4 key things that need to come together for program success, typically 6 of these 8 things are people and process related, and only data and tech are data and tech related. And actually, most of what we see, if we look to the left of this slide, comes down to 3 things. So leadership being unclear about the vision, strategy, and value. We've talked a bit about this. I mean, that's not unique with AI, is it? If anyone's read a ProSci Global survey over the last, 20 years, they would say the role of leadership is significant in how we deliver change or successful change. That's not new with AI, but what perhaps is new with AI is we can understand why that's such a difficult challenge given the pace of change that we face. So it's still valid, but maybe for different reasons. We've talked a bit about fear from AI. I mean, I hope that starts to shift as we move into next year, but that's still prevalent. And also, so quite interestingly, this idea that, you know, change is constant. So the need for adaptability and the need to innovate, to do that job design, to do the organizational design without any, you know, without any context, without any best practice, if you like, that requires innovation and creativity, and that's lacking. And I think that's why the value isn't getting delivered through AI. So you see this this one of these studies at the bottom here talks about 71% of leaders believe, you know, we need to be able to lead now through constant change. So constant change requires us to think about different approaches, of course, in what our role is. Now, I think that we are at a ideal time, I would say, for change management. How long have we really struggled to make the case for change? Certainly in my 25 years, I've felt some pain in that. And I'm sure others have too. But when you look at those three things, the three common things across those common causes, these are the kind of skills we have. We are brilliant at facilitating, you know, a clear narrative around a future state, albeit a North Star rather than a solution. We're brilliant about extracting value, particularly if you've worked in a, you know, change management office or done any benefits realization work. This is core stuff for us. You know, fear of AI. We are brilliant with people. We are so empathetic. We care about how they feel. This is our turf, you know. There may be some new learning to do around adaptability and innovation compared to some of the end step models that we take. But nevertheless, what that amounts to is facilitating behavioral changes at leadership level and changes in how we operate in the organization. We are brilliant at that. So I personally think AI is a huge opportunity for us in change, you know, and I've seen this over 2 years, just how much, you know, we can draw on a lot of our experience and skills to tackle some of these common causes. So I've done a little tick against the obvious ones on the right hand side here. So I think this is a brilliant moment in time for change managers and leaders, and you know, well, I for one am quite excited about it. I think I'll stop before we move on and just see if you've got any comments, Missy, or whatever.
So first of all, absolutely agree. This is an amazing opportunity for the change management community globally to show rather than tell our real value, you know. And I think for us, the best thing that we can do is to learn, to lean in, to remain curious. A personal challenge that I found with it and the people that I work with is this uncertainty. You know, it causes a bit of fear around, actually, I don't know what the end state is. So can I still use my tools? And my coaching is around, yes, absolutely, yes. You do not need to know what the end state is, provided we've got kind of that overall vision. You've always, this is what you've been doing anyway, behind the scenes, overlooked, overworked, and kind of saying that nobody's recognizing. But now this is the time to shine a light on the real value I think that change managers bring in organizations, and we should be seizing this with both hands. I understand it's easier said than done, and we are all going on our journeys ourselves to overcome our fear of AI. But nonetheless, the opportunity is there. There was this great question. Hi, both. I have a question on fear. In a recent Diary of CEO episode with Jeffrey Hinton, often called the godfather of AI, he expressed real fear about how far and how fast AI could go, suggesting we may already be losing control over it. As change managers, how do we help organizations and their people navigate that kind of fear, both the existential anxiety and the practical uncertainty, while still moving forward with responsible AI adoption?
Well, I think the clue to that, the answer for that is in the question, the responsible AI adoption. So AI is designed by people, developed by people, and used by people. And whilst much of it is unpredictable in terms of its output and actually very difficult to explain what is happening under the hood for most of us, we can ensure that we put the guardrails in place, the responsible AI guardrails in place, to ensure when we are designing it, we're doing so thinking about what we consider to be ethical and, you know, moral and in line with the values of the organization or whatever else. We naturally need it to be legal. We need to ensure that when we implement it, we are considering, you know, the risk to the data, cybersecurity aspects, that we are doing so in a way that is equitable, so that people, everybody, has the same has the same opportunity of using it. We're not excluding people. That the data is fair. So all these things, by the way, these are things we can put in place around the governance of how we design, develop, and use AI in the workplace. So we can control the data. We don't need to use ChatGPT and the world's data that built it. We can control data in our own instance, in our own environment. So these things are things that we can tackle if we consider them to be priorities for the organization.
Absolutely. And just going back to your points earlier around the scarf model and David Rock, I think also just upskilling or maybe kind of refreshing on how humans react to change and making sure that we are familiar with kind of the basics of neuroscience. We are not neuroscientists, we know that. Change management is a mixture of all these kind of brother and sister disciplines: neuroscience, business analysis, systems thinking, psychology. There's so much in there, but just making sure that we are aware so that when people are behaving in certain ways, you're able to understand why. Oh, maybe it's the status that's being triggered here. I can see this person has an issue around certainty, so that when we are framing our engagement strategies and the way that we're going in to talk to stakeholders, we're prepared and we're coming in with the right positioning so that we're not further triggering those things, because sometimes it can be ignorance that makes us push the wrong buttons of people. So you want to make sure you're skilled.
I think that's exactly right. And you know, we describe change. Actually, if we think about what a change manager is, I'm sure we would all have slightly different perspectives on what that actually means. For me, regardless of the label, we do need a much wider range, I think, of skills and capabilities at our disposal to deal with this kind of environment.
Yeah.
And perhaps one of the things I've done over the last couple of years is develop a framework, something that would just keeps us focused on the right things, in my mind, around how we can approach AI adoption in a way that gives us a little bit of assurance and comfort that there are certain things that we ought to be mindful of and watching for to overcome those common causes of failure or risk. And so 4 Ps: prepare, propose, pilot, and progress. These first 2, I spend 80% of my time on. And these are sort of fundamental in terms of recognizing, you know, actually the role of leaders, I think, is beginning to shift. If we think about continuous change and adaptability, the approaches and the skills that leaders need to change in order to create the right foundation. So not only do we need, you know, empathy, psychological safety, we need them to understand AI to a certain level. We need the guardrails in place that I've just described. And we need them, don't we, Nissi, to be thinking about things like, you know, thinking in systems. So we're not limiting our implementation in the silos of our organizations, but thinking systemically about how things are connected and how to approach change in that regard, and create an environment where other people can learn. I think, in particular, when we get, and so the second thing here, propose, this is about being crystal clear about the value we're seeking, the problem we're fixing, the problem statement, or the opportunity. I think, again, this is a great territory for change managers in terms of facilitating. And if we think about this if you think about design thinking skills, empathy, putting yourself in the position of the user, the user journey, all those sorts of things, I think this is exactly the kind of approach we need to tease out the underlying root cause issues that we need to tackle through the application of AI, rather than, playing whack-a-mole with the various issues that kind of pop up all over the place. So, and of course, systems thinking also helps us spot areas we can make small change for big impact, of course. And so these kind of skills, I think, are much more valuable, but they're facilitation skills that we're bringing people in. We're co-designing solutions with other people, and we are brilliant at facilitation. So applying those skills in a facilitation mode, I think, is very helpful. And then I won't talk too much about pilot and progress, but essentially, running pilots where you know what success looks like. So pilots run and run and run for months, and nobody's designed or decided what, go, no go looks like. So we need to kind of time frame those and say, well, what is success for us in this pilot? Have we reached it? Should we stop and do something else? That's lacking in quite a lot of areas. And then progress, scaling. This is not kind of go live and cupcakes. This is constant monitoring. The AI models are changing. The environment around us is changing. There's unintended consequences over longer periods of time that we just can't predict. So we need to keep monitoring, improving, iterating, so continuous learning as part of this process, and adaptation as we go. I want to just leave the audience for something practical, because there's quite a lot to take in here. But I've given this a bit of thought, and I wanted to pick one thing from the first three of these things that was useful. In the first one, and I think somebody's touched on this earlier, that actually probably the first thing we need to do is demonstrate the value of what change managers can do in this space to reduce that risk and to articulate the value. So actually getting leaders into a room, showing them what scarf impacts have on people, what happens in, to people in the brain, how that's getting in the way of adoption. Very useful thing to do, right? So that there's a kind of get leaders to understand the value that could be had with those change skills that we can bring to bear. And then those next two, it's about engaging with teams, workshopping what is their problem, not what we think they should do, but let them work it out for themselves. So facilitating discussions around, let's work as a team to pick your top problem, and let's see if we can fix that. And so you run a pilot to probably use the tools you've already got initially. Can that tool fix your problem? So these are hopefully three quite practical things we can do to start moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. And just because we're at time, I'm not calling it yet. What I am going to say is, if there's anybody who has to jump off the call now, I'm going to leave my newsletter on the screen. I'll talk with Neil so that I can send out information about his change accelerator and all the information, because if you're going to have to drop off, you're not going to have an opportunity to hear that now, but I will get that sent through to you. And then also, if any of you are able to stay, first of all, Neil, are you able to stay for another 5 minutes before I put it out? Okay. If anybody else is able to stay for another 5 minutes, we'll just kind of let Neil wrap up, see if there's any last questions. But otherwise, click the link on the screen. It'll show up soon, and I'll make sure I'll attach the info about Neil's Change Leadership Accelerator, because I think it's something that you'll find great. Sorry, Neil, continue. A sticker will appear on the screen.
Okay. Yeah. So, are there any questions that we can pick up, or? So just on what's on the screen. So AI Change Leadership Accelerator basically is 4 workshops that kind of dives into the detail of a lot of what I've discussed today. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, do connect, and it'd be great to carry on the conversation on LinkedIn.
Great. And if you use your phone now to get the QR code, you'll be able to pull up the information yourself now as well. Otherwise, if you click that link to newsletter, I'll make sure a recording of this session is sent to you along with this information. Okay, so we have a couple of questions just to close out. Okay, will this live be shared? Yes, it will do. Bravo to your point about leaders needing to think systemically. Silo AI application not tied to the larger strategic framework erodes adoption. Absolutely. We've got more than ever. We must create the conditions for people to live the change journey. And actually, as you were talking, Neil, I was like, this is the perfect test case to show true change management in action. So there's an onus on us to get it right. We need to do the work. We need to make sure that we are equipped. We need to make sure that we're coming forward with our A game, because this is the opportunity that the global change management community has been asking for years. It's now here. Let's show up. So whether it means getting equipped by the Change Leadership Accelerator, whether it means brushing up on your neuroscience knowledge, whether it means being a bit brave and running that practical session with leaders, as Neil was saying, to run them through a couple of the models and say, look, this is what you need to understand about what your people are experiencing so that they are equipped and you don't feel like you're pushing this change single-handedly uphill alone. You shouldn't. Neil has said it time and time again, facilitation, facilitation, facilitation. That is our role. We shouldn't feel like we are personally carrying this change forward. We are equipping people. We are asking the right questions. We're making sure that the right conversations are happening at the right time, or connecting those dots so that we've got that systems view. If I'm saying any of this and you're thinking, whoa, 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 I don't have that skill, I'm not sure how I would do it, find out, because this is a really, really great opportunity. We've got any AI tool for change management recommendation. Do you recommend any tools, Neil?
What's change management? Yes, I do. I think you can't go too much. You can't go wrong really with getting the basics right for ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity. ChatGPT, you'll know. Claude is similar to ChatGPT. If you don't know it, it's pretty good at content creation, I would say. So if you're doing a lot of content, Claude is not a bad place to go for that. And then Perplexity is really good at research. So if you want to do, in fact, I did most of my research there. If you want to do lots of research, it's good at providing the links to sources. So you don't have to worry so much about hallucinations.
Great. Okay, so we are pretty much at time. Thank you again so much, Neil, for joining us for this session. As I mentioned, there's so much that we could have covered, but I think this has been such a great start. And for people who are maybe wondering, I'm not sure where to start, I'm sure this has given them something. If you're watching this in the recording and you have any questions, let us know. If you're watching live, thank you so much for bearing with us and staying that little bit extra. Take care of yourself and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for the invite, and thanks to everyone for coming along.
Thanks, Neil.